We just got in some dramatic footage. Yesterday morning at about 8:45 a.m. local time, residents along the Gulf Coast in Louisiana got the sort of news alert that tends to rankle in that part of the country. A rig explosion just offshore. It's just before 9 a.m. Look at this. This drilling rig, owned by a company called Walter Oil and Gas, experienced a major emergency, a serious well blowout. All 44 crew members abandoned the rig. Everybody evacuated. The crew members boarded 2 lifeboats. They were then rescued by a nearby supply ship that brought all of them safely to shore. What was already a bad situation on that rig with that blown out natural gas well, hours later then got a whole lot worse. That stranded, blown out, evacuated rig, which was uncontrollably leaking natural gas, then ignited. At about 10:45 last night, the rig suddenly burst into flames, and then it just kept on burning. This huge, out-of-control, natural gas-fed fire in that blown-out well. That fire began late last night. The reason this picture looks like daylight is because it has continued to burn throughout today. Officials in Louisiana have spent the day not only trying to figure out how to put that fire out as the rig increasingly collapses, they're also trying to regain control of the runaway well, something that so far they have been unable to do. The latest plan is maybe to try to set up something alongside it to drill a relief well, so the well that's blown would essentially shut itself down eventually and stop spewing natural gas into those flames and into the Gulf. This latest rig explosion in the Gulf of Mexico happened not far from where the Deepwater Horizon rig blew out back in 2010, which of course caused the worst environmental disaster in American history. In terms of the environmental toll from this current accident, it remains unclear at this point, and frankly, it's still ongoing. Officials at one point reported seeing a mile-long sheen on the surface of the water in that part of the Gulf, as well as that ominous natural gas cloud that has been spreading from the rig ever since it exploded yesterday morning. But the situation remains fluid tonight. Again, that explosion took place on board a blown-out natural gas drilling rig just off the coast of Louisiana, about 50 miles off coast. Now, this is the scene, about 2,000 miles to the north. This is an underground blowout of sticky, toxic tar sands oil bubbling up from underneath the ground in Alberta, Canada. Alberta is the home of Canadian tar sands oil, which is the stuff that would flow through the Keystone pipeline if it's approved. And this week we learned about an underground oil blowout that caused this tar sands mess up there. We learned about that spill this week. But as the Toronto Star and Mother Jones have been reporting, it seems like this tar sands leak in Alberta has been going on actually for 9 weeks now. It has been going on out of control for more than 2 months, and nobody in the public seems to have known about it until now. The Toronto Star broke this story open after talking to a government scientist who'd been on scene at the spill site, who thought that the response was utter chaos, and who is now essentially blowing the whistle on both the spill and the company responsible. The scientist says the company is not disclosing the scope of these spills and that it's not just one of them. They're taking place, he says, in 4 separate sites in eastern Alberta. The scientist told the Toronto Star, quote, "Everybody at the company and in government is freaking out about this. We do not understand what happened. Nobody really understands how to stop it from leaking, or if they do, they have not put the measures into place." That spill in Alberta is not to be confused with the other spill in Alberta that you might remember us reporting on from a few weeks ago. That one took place in northern Alberta near a place called Zama City. That was the spill that officials chose not to disclose to the public until 11 days after it happened. That spill in northern Alberta, which is seen here, is different from the new spill in eastern Alberta, which you'd see here. You can see how you might get them confused. What's happening now is this sort of constant slow-motion environmental disaster when it comes to energy production, particularly when it comes to the fossil fuel industry. Out-of-control natural gas explosions off the Gulf Coast, almost daily tar sands oil spills to our north in Canada, sometimes even in our own backyard in places like suburban Arkansas. What caused that pipeline rupture down there anyway? These recurring disasters serve as the backdrop to the big political fights we are having in this country right now on the issue of energy. And today, that political fight was put into stark relief when President Obama delivered his high-profile economic address that the White House had been hyping for days. The president said today that this is the first in a series of speeches on economic issues that the president is going to be traveling the country to deliver over the next few weeks. In today's speech, the president touted the fact that during his presidency, we have doubled our investments as a nation in wind power and in solar power. The president said our priority as a country must be to cut down on carbon emissions and invest in renewable energies that do not add to the carbon problem, clean up the environment, and move to new, cleaner sources of energy. Well, congressional Republicans decided that they were going to pre-butt the president's big speech today by announcing ahead of the speech that their plan on energy and the environment is to cut the budget of the EPA by a third. Oh, yeah, environmental protection, who needs it, especially now? House Republicans, ahead of President Obama's big speech today, moved to cut funding to the EPA by 34%. And while the president is insisting that Americans reduce carbon emissions, Republicans included provisions in their bill today to block the EPA from controlling carbon emissions. House Republicans, while they were at it, also voted to slash the president's funding request for renewable energy. And I know everybody says slash whenever they're talking about like 2% cuts or whatever, but look at this. It's a 72% cut for renewable energy. That's slashed. The top Republican on the House Appropriations Committee laughed about it to reporters, saying about the president today, quote, "His priorities are going nowhere." We are in the midst of a slow-motion environmental disaster when it comes to energy right now. And the two sides that are fighting it out in the political arena on that issue could not be any farther apart, even if they wanted to be. And so what happens next?